Good morning and welcome to Rising. We've got another great show for you today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our week is progressing. It is Wednesday, and it's nice to see you, Lindsey.
It's nice to see you, too. I also got to see my baby Kinsley yesterday after 2 weeks of being in Qatar.
Oh, my goodness.
It was so nice to be reunited. We just hugged for like 20 minutes straight and watched show. She did my makeup. She has like a fake little makeup kit. So can you tell?
I cannot tell. So Kinsley and Colin did not go with you to Qatar.
They didn't.
Sometimes they come with you on your adventures.
Yeah, but this one was for News Nation. It was more of a docuseries instead of our travel show. I did try to push it so that they can come, but wasn't in the cars this time. Hopefully next time. Maybe I did miss them a lot. Coming up on Rising, President Trump snapped at an ABC reporter during an Oval Office press conference yesterday, and he even threatened to pull the network's license.
Plus, a group of Democrats released a video on X urging military and intelligence community members to defy illegal orders, prompting conservatives to accuse them of calling for an insurrection.
And Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has been criticizing her own party and feuding with President Trump as of late, but she's now taking aim at Fox News. But first, Robby, what's on your radar?
Well, the Trump administration signaled yesterday that it was moving forward on one of President Trump's key election promises, shutting down the Department of Education. As someone who has advocated for this outcome for many, many years, I'm personally thrilled it's finally coming to this. Now, the administration announced that the department's core functions would be handed off to other agencies in anticipation of finally closing down the building itself. Actually abolishing the Education Department would take an act of Congress, though the Supreme Court has okayed Trump's move to fire many of the department's bureaucrats, which is a good start. Frankly, it's astonishing to me that this is actually happening. Republicans have been promising to shut down the Education Department for 50 years. Ronald Reagan ran on ending it in 1980, a decade before I was even born. Every Republican president and most presidential candidates similarly vowed to shut it down, but then never took up the issue again when they had the chance to do so. The Trump administration is keenly aware of this. Yesterday, the Education Department's X account posted an unusually honest video about GOP achievements on this front to date, or lack thereof. Take a look.
I would like to dissolve the $10 billion National Department of Education created by President Carter.
But better education doesn't mean a bigger Department of Education. In fact, that department should be abolished.
I can assure you that teachers don't want to waste their time making their way through a maze of regulations.
That's not all. The video continues.
We have to literally erase the board and rethink from the ground up.
There's no authority for the federal government to be involved in education.
My administration will take all lawful steps to shut down the department. We're going to shut it down and shut it down as quickly as possible.
Now, if the day has finally come that a Republican administration is serious about fulfilling its promises and shutting down an unnecessary federal bureaucracy, then great. I want to be clear, however, that we should not merely shuffle all the existing functions of the department to other agencies. We should eliminate unnecessary, counterproductive, and, yes, unconstitutional interference from the federal government into the state's education policies. Closing the Department of Education is one of those ideas that really spooks liberal Democrats, even though it's far less radical an idea than they are willing to admit or consider. For starters, the department is simply unconstitutional. The Constitution does not grant the federal government any power to regulate education. That's reason enough in my book to close it down. Furthermore, the department doesn't actually do what it appears to do. It doesn't employ any teachers, it doesn't manage any classrooms, and it doesn't interact with students in any direct way. What it does is oversee grant money. For K-12, federal spending on education is small. It's only about 10% or less of what schools receive. Most of the money from K-12 schools, that comes from the states themselves. We certainly don't need a sprawling federal bureaucracy just to administer such a paltry sum of money. Now, the Department of Education does play a much larger role in the funding of higher education, in that the department oversees the student loan program, the federal program. That program needs to be scrapped anyway. We have now ample evidence that subsidizing student loans at the federal level is causing runaway tuition inflation and saddling thousands or millions of Americans with unsustainable levels of debt. We need to get rid of it now. After all, as Education Secretary Linda McMahon pointed out, Most of the department was offline during the shutdown, the government shutdown, and we hardly noticed. Schools kept running all across the country.
The federal Department of Education furloughed 90% of its staff. And what happened? Nothing. Schools stayed open. Students went to class. Teachers got paid. The shutdown proved our schools don't depend on Washington bureaucracy to function.
Yeah, she makes a good point. So why do we need it? We don't. And I'm for shutting it down immediately, Lindsey. Say goodbye to the Department of Education.
I'm against it. I think the reason why we saw so many years go past where you see Republicans coming to the forefront and making it, you know, a big claim about shutting it down and it never happening is because most of the country is against it. And so when kids become political capital or collateral, that's a big problem for me. Also, it's a big problem for the country. The Wall Street Journal said that 61% of voters actually oppose dismantling the Department of Education, and similar majorities also support prioritizing education and the Department of Education over funding tax cuts, which is where a lot of this extra free money possibly might go if we start to dismantle and gather funds. And so I think, you know, according to the National Education Association, there's a lot of negative impacts that this will have. You're calling this small, minute amount that the federal government gives to local schools something that's irrelevant, but it's certainly not. I think the vast majority of kids go to public schools. We're talking about 90% of students in the country.
Yeah, but we're not going to close any public schools. It's
I know,
just,
but
they're
going to lose. If it's 10% of that funding, it's still a significant amount of funding that we need to be overviewing.
They're going to have that fund. No, they're not getting rid of that funding. They're just going to have it administered by the Department of Labor.
According to people who studied this and spend a lot of time, people with kids with disabilities, they could be people that suffer the most. 95% of students that have disabilities go to public schools. So without federal oversight and funding, then these kids won't get the services, equipment, or some of the things that 10% of irrelevant funding you're talking about goes to. Class sizes might also explode, which would be a problem and a huge loss for teachers. Programs that pay for reading specialists, smaller class sizes, and high poverty areas provide support in those ways.
Well, they're
up
not
to
getting rid of
180
those programs. They're just going to have them
They're
administered
shuffling
by
them around so
labor
that
instead.
it's all unorganized. And then you're suggesting that they go further and don't even shuffle them, just straight up cut them.
I would straight up cut them.
But
That's
these
not
will
what they're
affect
doing.
students. So that's what I'm saying. It also will could possibly weaken protection against discrimination. So the Department of Education also has a job to enforce rules that protect kids from any discrimination in the classroom. Would you like to open the door for no oversight in that? And so there are a lot of things that that kids should be discriminated against.
Federal efforts to prohibit or protect or stop discrimination in schools have been disastrous. Under Obama, the Education Department sent guidance to K-12 schools that they had to be careful of disparate disciplinary actions on students. And so schools got spooked that they were going to lose federal funding if they disciplined kids, and it seemed that there was some racial discrepancy. But of course, because
does anybody care about the student that's disciplined because of racial discrepancy and then ends up in a pipeline that's not the best life for them?
Well, yeah.
Like, this is
so
relevant
This is exactly
too.
why we're shutting that down. That's holding back the entire classroom when you can't discipline badly behaved kids.
Okay, just eating though. Like, the Department of Education also helps with free meals and funding of those free meals and
where in the
basic services
Constitution
for
does it
schools.
say that the federal government should provide meals?
You want more kids or less kids to be fed? I mean, we're literally in a time right now where a lot of people are still reeling. Yeah, that's what you're looking forward to by having less meal programs in school. Like, there are people who actually rely on those, who won't eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner without those. There's people who are relying on SNAP benefits, and the government has been shut down, and they're going to school and looking for that first meal when their parents didn't cook last night. But you're so worried about giving money to tax cuts, or where do you want that money to go?
There's no federal authority
oversight
to have that program.
programs.
The states can.
But you're on an island with this. 60% of Americans, according to the Wall Street Journal, which is hardly a liberal website, says that Americans would like to keep the Department of Education.
60% of Americans could say we'd like to abolish the First Amendment. It wouldn't make it.
Who is the president doing this for, though? No one's calling. He can focus on so much that's bothering people right now. Right? Americans are largely uncomfortable with their finances.
He's doing it for
There's so
families
much that he can do.
and for
but families
students
aren't asking
and
for this. That's why I'm confused about
policy,
as somebody that has a child in school. It's just like, who's asking for this? No parents are coming to the table. There's no policy, though. All he's saying is, let's abolish it, and I'm getting it done. What are the next steps? That's always been my problem with the administration. They throw out these blanket statements and then leave it in disarray. That was my problem with Doge. Sure, we can cut, but you left everything in disarray with no plan or way forward. And that's why some things stuck, some things didn't stuck.
Well, we're not addressing the main thing that the Education Department does, because this is a small amount of money when we're talking about K through 12, is administer a federal student loans program that correlates, statistically has been shown to correlate with spiraling out of control higher education costs. We just desperately need to change this program. People are finishing college with massive levels of debt, and then they can't get jobs to pay off that debt. It's all due to the federal government subsidizing it. It's all due to this program. That is what their main role is, to oversee that program that is ruinous for people of our generation and people who are younger.
But colleges will still get more expensive. So with a lack of...
They've gotten more expensive in direct proportion to how much subsidized student loans there are.
With a lack of next steps, with a lack of plan, and just suggesting that we should cut the federal government, which supplies 30% of college student loans, I think that we need to be considerate that people, if 30% of students rely on that, what we're going to do instead.
But we're not doing that.
Because people cannot get these loans.
We're tricking them. They're tricks.
I don't like the student loan system either. That's why they're being forgiven. I just think that if there's nothing in its place, then people can't go to school.
That we have
Who
to
can
forgive
afford
them.
school?
Isn't that a admission that this is a bad program?
If it's a bad, but what's the next step?
Years later, we have to
so
contemplate having to just
do this
forgive
thing
the
where
debt.
they push an idea forward but have no solution to it. So
the solution is
canceling
to end the bad idea.
And then what? How do kids get to college? How do kids afford college? Is what I'm asking.
College tuition was affordable. You could work and afford it.
Tell me how they afford
40 years
right
ago
now.
before we started
Okay,
this
you're talking
program.
about ancient history. You want to abolish the way that kids get into school. They don't have a lot of money. So how do they afford college now that they cut all the federal programs that provide Pell Grants?
The price of tuition would be cheaper if the government was not encouraging the schools to raise rates.
So no plan then.
No. If we're talking about public universities, the University of Michigan is a public university. That's where I went, in the state of Michigan. The government of the state of Michigan could order the school to lower its tuition prices so that the residents of the state can afford to go there. I'd be all for that.
But that would require coordination from
I'm all for
cutting
that.
federal programs.
I'm all for government schools
governments.
to be ordered by the government. Schools can be administered by the government, and they should make them cheaper. I agree with that.
President Trump is snapping at a reporter in the Oval Office. That was yesterday in front of the Saudi Crown Prince. What he said, coming up next. We'll be right back.
A tense couple of exchanges yesterday between President Trump and a reporter during the bilateral meeting with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
The Saudi prince was in Washington yesterday for his first visit to the White House in 7 years. ABC's Mary Bruce asked him about a question about former Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi, whom the CIA concluded was murdered in 2018 at the orders of MBS. That question set Trump off. Take a look.
Somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
Just moments earlier, Bruce asked Trump about his business interests in Saudi Arabia, and then Trump went on the attack.
Is it appropriate, Mr. President, for your family to be doing business in Saudi Arabia while you're president? Is that a conflict of interest?
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business. But I'll answer your question.
Thank you.
I have nothing to do with the family business. I have left, and when I've devoted 100% of my energy. What my family does is fine. They do business all over. They've done very little with Saudi Arabia, actually. I'm sure they could do a lot. And anything they've done has been very good. That's what we've done. We've built a tremendous business for a long time.
Now, the final straw was a third question from Bruce about the Epstein files. And Trump took it a step further, threatening to pull her network's license.
Mr. President, why wait for Congress to release the Epstein files? Why not just do it now?
You know, it's not the question that I mind. It's your attitude. I think you are a terrible reporter. People are wise to your hoax, and ABC's your company, your crappy company, is one of the perpetrators. And I'll tell you something.
So why not just sign it now?
I think the license should be taken away from ABC because your news is so fake and it's so wrong. And we have a great commissioner, the chairman, who should look at that, because I think when you come in and when you're 97% negative to Trump, and then Trump wins the election in a landslide, that means obviously your news is not credible, and you're not credible as a reporter.
In response to the president's threat, Bruce received a lot of praise from fellow journalists. CNN Brian Stelter took to X, writing, quote, ABC's Mary Bruce deserves a lot of credit for asking these questions. When Trump insulted her news outlet, she calmly responded, but the question is important, sir.
Newsbusters managing editor Curtis Houck disagreed, writing his own post. It was about time a Republican, anyone, didn't even have to be President Trump, tore ABC's Mary Bruce a new one. She truly is the female Jim Acosta, which is not intended as a compliment. look, Trump loves feuding with reporters. I thought the questions were fine. They're hostile to Trump questions. If he doesn't answer them, he doesn't have to. I couldn't tell what her tone was really from the. Why are you?
Because you know her tone was not. What? She literally is asking. So if you look at the news headlines around the media, we're talking about conservative outlets, mainstream media. We're talking about Epstein. It's literally from afar when I was traveling. So she asked about the question. Yeah, she asked at a very mild-mannered tone. And you know that. You're very good at saying when the president is doing the most. And this would be one of those instances. She asked a legitimate question about the point at hand. The Saudi crown prince was in the Oval Office. And the Biden administration has actively accused the Saudi crown prince of ordering the death of a journalist. Okay, so and they're saying no, but that is a appropriate question since the last time we've seen that man in the Oval Office was not until before, or not since before that he was accused of that. So that would be a natural question of a journalist to ask. And then the business interest part is a valid question to ask because, as I mentioned, he blurred the line of family business a little bit by having,
I'm not,
building hotels over there in Saudi government-owned territory.
I have no problem with the questions.
So for him to say he's going to pull the license, again, on the heels of the Jimmy Kimmel incident, it seems very inappropriate if he understands his role and what he should not be doing. People are not going to, and then he makes up these polls. 97% of ABC's coverage is negative.
That's not made up.
That's not a real number.
It's not made up.
Who polled it?
Newsbusters.
No, that's a lie.
No, it's not true.
It's 97% Newsbusters? I'm going to pull that poll.
Coverage of Trump is 90% negative according to media watchdog.
No, on ABC, I'm asking. On ABC, is 97% of the coverage negative? That is just,
yes.
He just
I don't know that that's the exact statistic.
I don't know that it is either. And so he's
I saw this. I saw. You want me to look it up? I do.
I would like you to look it up.
I saw
and I think that
something like that.
She handled herself very well, saying these questions are important, sir. And him calling the network crap and using tones like that is not the way that we would like a president of our country to behave. No.
Look, it can be as negative as it wants. I don't care. But it's, Media Research Center finds 92% of major network evening news coverage of Donald Trump during his first 100 days in office was negative. That's according to the Media Research Center. It's a right-of-center publication. So
right-of-center publication.
So you might disagree with it, but
right,
92%.
About? And he's also the numbers of it. And it wasn't
that wasn't for ABC specifically.
Right, so he's just saying anything. And so he's harassing this girl. She literally has a job. Now that all the media organizations done got kicked up out of the Pentagon, can't even report on what's going on over there. He's literally trying to throw them off of television and revoke licenses because he doesn't like what they're saying. As somebody who operates in a role as a journalist, sometimes operates in a role of an analyst and a commentator. Other times, you can understand why this dialogue is wildly inappropriate when that girl, Mary, was just in there trying to report and ask the real most pressing questions, which is the actual job of a journalist. Yes?
Maybe.
No. It's not. This is crazy.
Let us know what you think. Up next, a coalition of Democrats urged military and intelligence community members to defy any illegal orders from the Trump administration. And conservatives are quite outraged. Don't go anywhere. White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller and other conservatives are accusing a group of Democrats of calling for an insurrection.
The coalition of former intelligence and service members, which includes Senators Alyssa Slotkin and Mark Kelly, urged military intelligence community and intelligence community personnel to defy any illegal orders. Let's watch.
We know you are under enormous stress and pressure right now.
Americans trust their military.
But that trust is at risk. This administration is pitting our uniformed military
and intelligence community professionals
against American citizens. Like us, you all swore an oath
to protect and defend this Constitution.
Right now, the threats to our Constitution aren't just coming from abroad,
but from right here at home. Our laws are clear. You can refuse illegal orders.
You can refuse illegal orders.
You must refuse illegal orders.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law
or our Constitution.
Many conservatives on X appeared flabbergasted over the video. Miller wrote on X, "Democrat lawmakers are now openly calling for an insurrection." And Ruthless Podcast co-host Josh Holmes writes, "We recommend light to moderate treason for reasons, #ship. What a hilariously disconnected message. We won't say why you need to do the treasons, but trust us, it's the Constitution."
Now, the Trump administration has carried out multiple deadly airstrikes on alleged Venezuelan boats since September. Some lawmakers have pressed the White House as to whether service members can be held legally responsible if the strikes are later determined to be unlawful.
Look, I have honestly no basic problem with this idea. If someone who serves in the government was told to shoot someone in the face, I hope they would question it and not do it. I'm not sure, like, what are the illegal orders they're referring to here? Are they saying that, for instance, the National Guard troops who are here in D.C. helping to deter crime and keep order, it's been wildly successful, that they should refuse to do that? I mean, if you're broadly uncomfortable with the government's doing, you should not work for the government. If you are not happy with what military superior officers want you to do, this is not the role for you. But if for the military to function, for unit cohesion to be successful, the way the military works, right, is generally that you follow the orders. We don't hold this little committee hearing where we decide whether we're going to do what we're told to do. That's like not how the military works. But yes, if you are told to do something blatantly, flagrantly wrong or immoral, don't do it. And if you are regularly confronted with that quandary, then you don't belong in the military, is what I would say. I'm not sure what specifically they're referring to here. And What I think they have in mind is just the way the Trump administration is using the military, which they don't agree with, which is a totally separate question.
Yeah, I think you're right? You have an option, just exit the military, right? But I think that there's also a larger question of like the over-militarization in the last few months of our servicemen and women, right? When we had that meeting with Pete Hegseth and President Trump that no one knew what it was, and they gathered all these leaders in the military together, and some quotes that came out of that were to treat American streets kind of like a testing ground, and President Trump was being criticized for his harsh language there. People were like, wait, are we like declaring war within the U.S. and changing the name of the department to the Department of War, and then, changing, which we talked about in Venezuela, narcotics missions, which are usually voted on and talked about through Congress, into terrorism missions, and then just blanket skipping over Congress and having these servicemen and women commit these acts that leave people dead. One in specific from the New York Times, a family member of a Caribbean family that says, my son was just in Venezuela and now he's dead. And so I think that there's so much going on here and so much at stake where, yes, your job is to follow the rules of the president, but a lot of people have paused. Even people like Rand Paul have paused about some of these orders.
I am similarly concerned about what's going on and worried that it's not constitutional. That's a question, though, for the administration, for Congress. It's not really, in my view, a question for ordinary service members who should generally carry out the orders given to them.
Yeah,
right?
It would certainly be
the idea that they're the primary bearers of the responsibility here is not.
Well, they're the ones that have to go to bed at night for following through with the action.
Well,
and I think that it would become this huge tension if our service members questioned everything that the government had ordered historically, right? Like, don't go into Afghanistan, then we wouldn't be able to operate, right? It would be too esoteric of ideas discussed, and like that's what Congress is for. If the president skips over Congress,
let's give that message to the message that Alyssa Slotkin and the others. Let's give that message to Congress and to the administration. Not really put this on the service members themselves, is what I would say.
Coming up, I'll be discussing how President Trump is threatening to pull World Cup matches if certain governors and mayors hosting them don't, quote, behave. Stick around.
All right, Lindsey, what's in your lens today?
Yes, we got a lot to talk about. So one thing you learn fast when you cover global stories and spend time on the ground in different countries, hosting a World Cup is transformative. I was just in Qatar last week, and you could see how that tournament reshaped their entire tourism economy. Infrastructure upgrades, packed hotels, new jobs, a level of national pride that spilled into almost every conversation. The World Cup isn't just a game, it's an economic engine and an international spotlight. So with the U.S. finally stepping into that spotlight next year, what you'd expect right now is unity, coordination, a moment to show the world we can pull something big off without the usual chaos. And then President Trump stepped into the Oval Office. Standing next to the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, the president started floating the idea of actually pulling World Cup matches from certain U.S. cities. Not based on logistics, not based on FIFA decisions, but based on whether Democratic mayors and governors would, quote, behave. Those are his words, not mine. In that Oval Office moment, he said, quote, the governors are going to have to behave. The mayors are going to have to behave. Then he pivoted to California and started musing about sending in the National Guard to Los Angeles to give that city some, quote, extra help. Now, this wasn't subtle. It was a warning shot, and it was the first one. I mean, it wasn't the first one. Trump has already threatened Boston for its Democratic mayor, Michelle Wu. Now Los Angeles and Seattle are on the list, cities that have been planning, spending, and preparing for years. Cities FIFA already vetted. And then he went even further.
If we think there's going to be a sign of any trouble, I would ask Johnny to move that to a different city. We have a lot of cities that would love to have it, number one, and we'll do it very safely. So if we think there's a problem in Seattle where you have a very, very liberal/communist mayor, I would say, certainly beyond just liberal. I watched her over the weekend. Wow, that's another beauty we got there. But if we think there's going to be a problem, Johnny, can I say we will move? I don't think you're going to have this problem, but we're going to move the event to someplace where it's going to be appreciated and safe.
Seattle, the city Infantino himself toured and called a, quote, cut above the rest, suddenly being cast as a security risk. That's a pretty wild pivot, especially for an event already awarded in 2022, with 11 U.S. cities spending years on infrastructure, security, coordination, and preparation. It's hard to overstate how unprecedented this would be, moving World Cup games months before kickoff. That's not just rare, it's unheard of. This isn't swapping a conference room. These host cities have budgets, partners, hotels, transit systems, and millions of visitors already locked in motion. But all that is now colliding with Trump's broader tactic, sending the National Guard, ICE, CBP, and other federal forces into Democratic-run cities to crack down on immigration and crime. We've watched these deployments raise alarms from community leaders and civil rights groups. And we've seen reports of U.S. citizens getting swept up in the dragnet. Just this weekend, Charlotte got a taste of that, quote, help. Trump says his preference is simply that Democratic mayors invite the National Guard in right now. No pushback, no debate, and if not, well, their World Cup games might be on the line. Look, I'm all for keeping people safe, but using the world's biggest sporting stage as leverage over America's own cities, that's not security policies, that is political theater. And the World Cup deserves better than a power play. It deserves unity that it was designed to bring.
What sport is this? Is this soccer?
This is soccer. This is the most popular sport in the world. And so to not know about it, kind of shows the ego of the American that doesn't understand that the most popular sport worldwide is not, it's football, which we don't call it, but soccer.
We have actual football, which is...
Yeah, but it brings out millions of people that travel. Sure. We're going to bring our economy boosted in all these cities that planned for years. And so even if you specifically, Robby, don't care about it, the rest of the world is traveling to the U.S. to inflate our economy and bring it up.
From cities, particularly in East and Southeast Asia, maybe in the Middle East, you just come back from Qatar, that are orderly, where there's no crime.
No, they come from Europe also.
Right, there it's criminal and dirty, we know. But in other places, it's clean and it's safe. And they're going to come to our cities and find, oh wow, America is not doing as well as I thought. Maybe that is what the administration is trying to guard against, giving us projecting weakness because of the crime and dysfunction and disorder in some of these cities like Europe. We don't want that, and so Trump is expressing that concern.
Yes.
We shouldn't move. You're right. We shouldn't suddenly yank from Seattle or wherever else
Los
the
Angeles,
ability to
Boston,
host a soccer game. I don't see why the federal government has anything to do with coordinating this. I also think, frankly, the benefits of hosting large sporting events in terms of like economic development, et cetera, is always overstated. I find it just gross how much government money is spent on building new stadiums for private teams, if we're talking about just domestic sports. Yes, you get an economic boost, but think about all the money you spent to build the infrastructure in the first place, right? So it's not so much a net increase necessarily as just shifting resources from one group from the tax base of the area to some other, to the vendors and merchants and those things. So I'm skeptical of that as well, but I think that's the administration's fear, that we would look like our cities are dysfunctional.
Well, I think that he should have conversation, like I said, about the National Guard in the beginning, and not first threaten publicly and then get mad when a mayor or a governor says, oh, no, we're not interested in that route. Let's discuss about long-term ideas like community policing or trying to figure out what a long-term solution looks like. But since he skipped those steps, it already caused tension, like coming at the Democratic mayor of Boston. And obviously he has a beef with Newsom. They're back and forth, who is overseeing California. And just picking out certain cities, why doesn't he try to figure out how to work alongside these people to make it the best World Cup ever?
Community
He's threatening. How does that look, though?
More policing. It means more.
It means
police
finding
and
people
more
that are close to
policing.
the community to police the community, as opposed to the National Guard, who is completely outside of the community, just coming in with military uniforms and standing there, like we have in D.C.
Well, if I can get the Democrats to admit that we need more policing, then yeah, okay, we can talk. That's an idea they found very, very baffling.
There's a long list of things that we can do, but I also think that when you're looking at the world that's watching us, and America gets out of its own ego and understands that the rest of the world will come here to support and continuously support the World Cup because they care about soccer more than Robby does, that even after the games are over, people will still come, as I saw happening in Qatar, to see the stadiums or to see all of the different monuments that end up, like, government pays for to be there to commemorate the fact that a World Cup was hosted there. And so this is not all to go to waste. This is something that brings national pride and brings attention to certain cities that maybe people weren't going to travel to. People might come and go to New York all the time. That's like the #1 international tourist destination, right? But people might not come all the time and go to Seattle or Boston. And so now these are places that people who are outside of our country are going to stop, spend money, and continue to patronize businesses there. And so somehow that's a bad thing because President Trump thinks our crime is so out of control that we won't be able to host these people in 6 months. And I just don't believe he thinks that. I think he's just throwing out idle threats because he's not getting what he wants. And so this is how a baby throws a tantrum.
I think we're very much at cross purposes here. I would rather have the cities be made nicer and cleaner and more safe and spend money there on things that are legitimate functions of government, which is providing for public safety and maintaining the public parks and those things. Those are the legitimate functions of government. Making nicer sports stadiums and building sports monuments or whatever is not at all a function of government and should not be done. So if we're going to spend government money, spend it on making the cities nice.
So the president should have said no thank you to the Biden should have said no thank you to the World Cup when they awarded it to the U.S. and then gave it to cities. That's what you're saying, because he's in the.
I would need to know more about exactly who pays for what in terms of getting the city ready. If it's voluntarily being done, if it's being done via democratic means, or if it's being done by private forces, then fine. If it's the federal government and the taxpayers' responsibility, then yeah, I very well would have said no thank you.
And now that cities have been preparing for this since 2022, you think it's appropriate now, 6 months out, for the president to say we might just switch gears? That's a good strategy?
No.
Exactly. So what are we doing? We're just embarrassing the U.S.
I'm
in
just
front of
giving you the
everybody.
Trump administration's point. We don't want to be embarrassed when they show up, and it's a mess. That's my view. Up next, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez disappointed some on the left when she downplayed the idea of a primary challenge against House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Stay with us. New York Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, who campaigned for New York City Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, apparently distancing herself from her allies in the Democratic Socialists of America and throwing her support behind Hakeem Jeffries ahead of 2026.
In an interview with Axios, AOC signaled that she would not support a primary challenge against the House Minority Leader after New York City Council member Chiose filed a paperwork to launch a primary campaign for Jeffries' district. She told Axios that she was not aware of his intention to primary Jeffries, but, quote, I certainly don't think a primary challenge to the leader is a good idea right now.
And it's not just AOC that seems to have those reservations. Fellow DSA member and confidant Zohran Mamdani also seems to be unsure about challenging Jeffries. According to that Axios report, Mamdani said of Osei, I believe that there are many ways right here in New York City to both deliver on an affordability agenda and take on the authoritarian administration in the White House. As for Jeffries, he welcomed the primary challenge, telling reporters this week that Osei should, quote, come on in, the water is warm. The frustration with Democratic leadership is so pervasive among the Democratic Party. I think it is mostly and more focused on Chuck Schumer. But Jeffries is also not very popular. So it is interesting to me that AOC and Mamdani, Mamdani is not a member of Congress, but is a mayor of a very, very large city in New York. Hakeem Jeffries is of New York. So it is interesting to see their view that they're not going to support a fellow Democratic socialist necessarily to challenge him. Signals to me that AOC wants to remain, I have no idea about Mamdani, but AOC wants to remain, I guess, on good enough terms with Jeffries at least, although she's been very evasive about whether she would challenge Schumer in 2028. I predict she will just go straight to running for president, so he doesn't need to worry. But, well, maybe he should worry, because if he makes it too easy for her, she might decide that, well, Senate is a safe pick. I don't know. What do you say?
I think timing matters, right? So Mamdani won in a very progressive New York City, and that's a signal to what the appetite of New York is. And I know the larger media wants to paint the picture of the future of the Democratic Party, but unfortunately or fortunately, Democrats haven't agreed to that future. Hakeem Jeffries is one of the first people on the face of not agreeing to that future based on how long it took him to even support Mamdani. And so I think when you look at the friction, AOC is smart, and she understands that the more that she looks at that possible presidential run, she has to remember that she would campaign on, even with her leftist policies, she would campaign on being the president for all, and more specifically appeal to the broader Democratic Party. In the broader Democratic Party, there still are a lot of people that felt like Mamdani was a bit too much for a wide federal run race, like it worked in New York. And so I think AOC understands that and thinks that perhaps Osei is jumping in way too soon. Like, because Mamdani won doesn't mean that everybody needs to be a Democratic socialist on the ticket across the board for the midterms, right? That is exactly what Republicans want, and that does not represent the entire country.
Why
right?
not?
That's because it's
Why
just
not?
That's not what people want to do.
Go for it.
No, that's
Go
ridiculous.
for it, my man. I think it's time.
Look, he said some good stuff. Osei said some good stuff. He said in a statement that he was exploring this from because the left is failing to like punch back properly and failing to lead effectively. And that's the voice of a lot of young people. They feel like people should be doing more. Specifically, that's why Chuck Schumer was on the chopping block, because he caved at that first possible shutdown and then allowed this one to drag on into eternity. So people got what they want. So does that mean Chuck Schumer keeps his job? Like, there's a lot of people who are considered like, you know, staples in the Democratic Party that younger people want to go and want to see this new blood. And he's probably of the coalition that, whether it's him or a wide variety of younger people, they want to see new voices that actually listen to what people are looking for. Because just because the Democrats won this recent election cycle, which a lot of people had expected, that doesn't, to me, determine what the future of the Democratic Party looks like and how comfortable they should be going into the midterms. They still have entire restructuring to do with the party after Kamala lost, a real task ahead of them to find out what the voice is and like who would be on the ballot in 2028, and specifically what's the agenda for the midterm. So I think that they have their hands full. The thing that is working well for them is that the president is not doing too well or well at all in polling, and there are a lot of issues that everyday Americans are frustrated about, like the economy, like tariffs, and so they can campaign on the things that he's not doing right, but at some point they're going to have to campaign on what their strategies are and what their response properly is. And that differs between like the Mamdani socialist strategy to the Hakeem Jeffries strategy.
Well, right. They have to pick a direction. This person, Osei, is a far left, again, Democratic socialist, has socialist in the title of how he presents himself. Well, to Abigail Spanberger's point, the successful winner of the Virginia gubernatorial race, she said, I don't want to ever hear the word socialist again. She said that on a campaign strategy call with other members of the House, I believe, at the time, several years ago. And yet people with socialist in their bio are still seeking office on behalf of the Democratic Party. And yes, of course, Republicans take a certain amount of glee at that, because socialism is not popular. It's deservedly unpopular because socialism is synonymous with authoritarianism and central control and ensuing poverty, as tends to happen in socialist-run economies of the previous century. We don't have that many experiments in socialism going on right now, but you can go to North Korea for one of them. So yes, we hope, we being the right, hope that there's a lot of investment in running as socialists.
The silly part about this whole thing is that both parties have a lot of soul searching to do. We talked about this a lot yesterday. People can go back and watch that segment, but Republicans have to figure out what the heck they're doing after Trump. We see current day and almost every day that Marjorie Taylor Greene and Trump are disagreeing. Fuentes is rising, and that's in disagreement with the party. There's a lot of disarray going on. And Democrats just don't know what they're doing also, because after Kamala left, they had these wins, and then they had Mamdani, and they're like, wait, that's not us. So what's going on? So I think both both parties are at a similar space, but heavy's the head that wears the crown. And since the president is in power and since Republicans run both the Senate and the House, a lot of people will look to some of the failures as Republican issues, whether we proceed in the next year or so and have success or don't as a country. A lot of that will be a referendum. I think when people go to the voting booth, they'll say, well, you were in power and this is what was done. So that's what Democrats have to their advantage. But I think both parties got to figure out a lot in the next 3 years if they want to send any viable candidate forward, whether it's AOC or whoever, how that's going to appeal to the broader public. I mean, you're going to be the president of the entire United States. You're going to, as you start to put candidates forward, you're going to more cement that you want this socialist agenda. And so does the party want to align with that? And then the same thing for Republicans. As they continue to propel and have interviews with people like Fuentes, you are cementing that you want to align with a racist agenda. I mean, there's a lot of soul searching to do in both parties. And I think that Republicans can laugh, but it's a disaster right now.
Mm-hmm. We'll see.
Up next, Marjorie Taylor Greene took a shot at Fox News during an interview with Vanity Fair, saying that she watches the conservative network the least. We'll be right back after this.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene has been taking aim at certain Republicans as of late, but she's also bashing Fox News.
Greene sat down with Vanity Fair for an interview where she took a blatant hit at the conservative cable news network. She tells Vanity Fair, quote, "Everyone thinks that I have suddenly changed. And I haven't," she said. "I'm doubling down on how much I love this country and its people. I'm radically doubling down to the point where it doesn't matter who I disagree with. I'm disagreeing with my own side." Vanity Fair continues, writing, quote, "The only difference now," she said, "is that she's earned a strange new respect in the mainstream." Greene then went on to discuss how she's been invited to CNN, Bill Maher's show, and The View. But Vanity Fair writes, quote, "She says she remains blacklisted from Fox News over her criticisms of the network, adding that she no longer watches much. Quote, "I watch Fox News the least," she said. A Fox spokesperson disputed this, noting Greene was last on Fox News in June and February before that. Greene said she prefers to watch CNN, NBC, CNBC, the BBC, and local news.
All right. Earlier on Tuesday, Greene directly responded to Trump, calling her a traitor. Here she was.
I was called a traitor by a man that I fought for 6 years for. And I gave him my loyalty for free. I won my first election without his endorsement, beating 8 men in a primary. Let me tell you what a traitor is. A traitor is an American that serves foreign countries and themselves. A patriot is an American that serves the United States of America and Americans like the women standing behind me.
I have a hard time believing that she's not going on Fox News and Fox doesn't want her on. Like, she's probably making strategic choices about what media she wants to be on. And while I'm broadly supportive of her, she should be a little bit careful with if you're getting strange new respect from the mainstream media, you should think about why that is. She should work not to alienate the MAGA base, I think, by being too combative with Trump. That said, I think it was inappropriate for Trump to say that she's a traitor. I don't think it was calling for violence against her, as she seems to make it out to be. But she is right to remain principled on Epstein disclosure and foreign policy and other things, and it's fine to disagree with Trump, and I think he's going after her harder than he should be. She's also now leaning into it a lot, which is going to make her really popular for at least a short while with CNN, and is going to create some really perverse incentives. But so I would just say, watch yourself, MTG, because I quite like you.
What if she sees the writing on the wall for the future when Trump's out of office? Maybe she's like, well, he can't run again, and I know that some of his policies may be a disaster for me. I mean, she even talked about the Argentinian beef, I think. She's been in every argument saying, I don't like this. And so Vanity Fair estimates, and I read the whole article, they were saying she's not anti-Republican stances. She still has America First signage all over her office and is very much for policies that were historically Republican. But then they said that she sounds like she's on a mission to save Trump from himself. I kind of wanted to know what you estimate about that, because it seems like she's whoever's advising you, and she said that on air, is bringing you down the wrong path. And I completely disagree with it. And so this is almost fascinating to watch, because it's not somebody who's about to write a book about changing parties. She literally is no, we have went away from what we unspokenly agreed upon. And he's in the middle of not even taking a meeting with her or having dialogue, but also making fun of her, calling her a rhino. These are quotes,
the only
raging
person
lunatic,
I think might actually
traitor.
change parties is John Fetterman. I think
Fetterman might change parties.
I think that might be a loss for the Dems. There is something to this, the advisors you surround yourself with. I mean, look, there's disagreements, as I say all the time, in the MAGA coalition. How hard to go on tariffs? What level of immigration, of high-skilled immigration? The strikes on Iran? What level of support to give Israel? These are actual areas of some tension and disagreement in MAGA circles between more populist people, more libertarian people, some more hawkish elements that are still holdovers from the Bush administration. And she has a variety of stances there that disagree with some of the people advising Trump, like Stephen Miller is extremely, extremely harsh on immigration, I think to a fault. Laura Loomer, who does a lot of advising the Trump, she's not in the administration, but does a lot advising Trump people on personnel to hire and to fire. I sometimes agree with her and sometimes don't. She's really out to get MTG right now. They're out to get each other.
Yeah.
They have big foreign policy disagreements, although agreements in other places. It's interesting. Yeah, she's trying to navigate these waters and say that Trump surrounded himself with some good people and some bad people, and I think that's a fair point to make. I think she might be able to make it actually very effectively if she were to be on Fox News again. I would encourage her to do that.
I think if Fox did invite her on and she denied the invitation, I think they should have said that in their statement. But if they just said, oh, she was on in June, she's been the biggest topic for since June. So if they didn't invite her on, that's kind of wild. I also
it's not a like any other cable network. It's not while it is right of center and conservative and broadly supportive of Trump, there are a variety of programs and hosts from all over the kind of MAGA contingent, and then also more, neutral news reporter type people like Bret Baier and others who you could do that. There's so much you could do.
That's why it's surprising that they said the last time she was on in June and didn't note, we invited her on last week. Like she's been in the news. She's someone, cable networks invite the latest newsmaker on. Mm-hmm. She's been making news for the entire fall so far. Yeah. But also she said that she was a part of this toxic politics culture and is addressing that. And she's going into the elephant in the room is that she's up for re-election next year. And so I think she's trying to make sure that she has a nice, smooth track runway for all of her constituents that may be frustrated by some of Trump's.
Well, I don't know if she's making it smoother or not, because some friction with Trump, doesn't help you in a R-leaning district, but we will have to see about that. That does it for us today on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way later today, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so that you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you later.